Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Anne Arundel County Public Schools 2018 Tuesday Summer Series. In an effort to address and provide information on topics of concern to residents across the county, Anne Arundel County Public Schools is hosting 6 Summer Series sessions, and tonight being the first. Our session will end no later than 7 o'clock. Please be advised that the session is being recorded and will be posted on the website for public reference. Note cards have been provided for you to write down questions pertaining to this evening's topic. Questions will be reviewed and read by our moderator, Dr. Maureen McMahon, and only questions on the note cards will be acknowledged. Personnel and private issues can be discussed with our staff at the conclusion of the meeting. This evening's session topic is transportation, specifically transporting your children to school, parent concerns, and safe bus stop habits. Our Supervisor of Transportation, Mr. Les Douglas, will provide an overview of transportation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to speak with you tonight, and hopefully I'll give you some information that's useful, and again, we'll have questions at the end. The purpose of tonight's presentation is twofold. First is to address several common parent concerns regarding transportation procedures and policies, and second is to discuss bus stop habits that parents and students should use to ensure safe boarding and discharge from the bus. But first, a few facts. The Transportation Department spends approximately $58 million to transport approximately 60,000 students to and from school on 600 school buses each year. Each week, our buses drive a total of approximately 280,000 miles. That's more than the distance from Annapolis to the moon. The issues we're going to talk about tonight will be who is and who is not eligible for transportation to and from school, when are routes extended, are there exceptions to the eligibility rules, who is responsible for students before they get to the bus, on the bus in the morning, and after they get off of the bus in the afternoon. Also, inclement weather procedures and collector stops for magnet schools. So, who's eligible and who's not eligible for transportation to and from school? Transportation from established bus stops shall be provided to pre-kindergarten and kindergarten students who live over 1/2 mile from the school to the nearest accessible route. Using the nearest accessible route, excuse me. All other elementary school students who live more than 1 mile from the school by the nearest accessible route, and all middle and high school students who live more than 1.5 miles from their assigned school by the nearest accessible route. Now, there are exceptions. If there's no suitable walkway between the home and the school, then they will get transportation. In some cases, students live very, very close to the school, but because they would have to cross a major highway, a major arterial roadway without a crossing guard, we would provide transportation. So those are exceptions. When are routes adjusted? When do we add a stop on a bus stop or on a bus route? Consideration will be given to the extension of an existing bus route when one or more students walk more than 1 mile to the bus stop. Other factors that will be considered are time available to make the extension, suitability of the roads for the school bus operation, and availability of an appropriate turnaround area. So if there's a road that extends more than 1 mile, but it's not a public road, or there's no area to turn around, then the school bus would not go back that road. Extension of bus routes over non-public roads leading into developments will be subject to the following conditions. The owner of these roads will be permitted to retain their rights of ownership, and the owners construct or reconstruct such roads in accordance with specifications available from the respective Director of Public Works, and that they guarantee to maintain such roads to the satisfaction of the respective Director of Public Works. Okay. Seem to be just a bit out of order here. When a walk area is extended, if an audit of a walk area indicates that there are students who are within the 1/2 mile, mile, or 1.5 miles, and they're acceptable walkways, then we will add those students to the walk area. And again, there has to be an acceptable walk path. New residents within the prescribed walk distance. If a new residence is added, a new subdivision, and it's within the 1.5 miles, or in the case of pre-K, 1/2 mile, then we will add them to the acceptable to the walk area. And then something has been happening over the last couple of years, and it will continue, and that is that the county transportation office has been looking into where to put sidewalks in the county. And our department, the transportation office of the school system, has been cooperating with them to give them maps of our various walk areas so that they can identify areas where a sidewalk will be of most use. So we're coordinating with the county transportation office to identify where new sidewalks will be put in. So as they put in these new walk paths, it potentially means that there will be more kids walking to school and will not be eligible for a bus ride. Are there exceptions to the eligibility rules? Students are to use one designated bus stop for both to and from school transportation. Requests for services at other than one designated bus stop must be evaluated based on the exceptional transportation request form provided by the school and completed by the parent, following the guidelines outlined on the form. There are also exceptions for the eligibility rule for IEPs and 504 plans. In some cases, this exceptional transportation will be established for students through the IEP process or by directive of a 504 plan for students with disabilities. The Transportation Office will implement these exceptions based on specific directions from the Special Ed Department. These exceptions are never implemented by the Transportation Office through direct requests from parents. Now, who's responsible for the students before they get on the bus in the morning and after they get off the bus in the afternoon? The school system responsibility for students begins when students board the bus in the morning and end when the student discharges from the bus in the afternoon. Student safety and behavior is the responsibility of the parents or guardians prior to boarding the bus in the morning and after leaving the bus in the afternoon. Now let's discuss inclement weather issues. If we're going to close school, you have either a code red or a code blue. Most of those deal with what happens with school system employees. As the general public, as parents of students, you have to understand that if there's a code red or a code blue and schools are closed, that it will affect evening high school and alternative programs. Let me go through the list. Code blue is all public schools in Anne Arundel County will be closed for the day because of emergency conditions, but central and satellite offices and school offices are open. School activities. Evening high school and the alternative programs are canceled when Anne Arundel County Public Schools are closed for inclement weather. After school and evening activities at schools, including practices, performances, clubs, and athletic events, are canceled when schools are closed for inclement weather. Code red is the same, other than the fact that the staff at the school doesn't have to go into school. But it is important that when schools are closed, it means all evening activities are closed also. Let's discuss a 2-hour delayed opening. And this sounds obvious to say, but we get quite a few calls that say, if schools are delayed by 2 hours, when will the bus come? Okay? Buses will arrive at their regular stops 2 hours later than the usual time. So if school starts at 7:30, it'll start at 9:30. If the bus comes at 6:45, it'll come at 8:45. So it's the bus also will be 2 hours later than the normal pickup. Full-day kindergarten is in session, but it will open 2 hours late. Half-day morning sessions in preschool, ECI, and developmental centers are canceled. Half-day afternoon sessions of preschool, ECI, and developmental centers operate on normal hours. Center for Applied Technology, morning sessions are canceled, and afternoon sessions operate as normal. Schools close at regular time. Walking students should use extreme caution. Now, a 2-hour early dismissal. Details for when Anne Arundel County schools will dismiss 2 hours early are half-day afternoon sessions of preschool, ECI, and developmental centers are canceled. Half-day morning sessions of pre-kindergarten, ECI, and developmental centers will dismiss at regular time or 11:20 a.m., whichever is earlier. All other schools dismiss 2 hours earlier than normal. Bus riders transported home via normal routes. All after-school and evening activities at schools, including activity buses, evening high school, alternative programs, practices, performances, clubs, and athletic events are canceled. There's always concern about the collector stops for the magnet programs. The magnet programs generally have county-wide attendance area and result in considerably longer bus rides to and from school. This is of necessity. Something you might not many of you might know, but some don't, is we have the longest coastline of any county in the United States, and what that means is that you might be at the end of one peninsula, and you have to go to school at the end of the next peninsula, and because it's a county-wide program, it takes you forever to get there. We also have two military bases, Fort Meade and also the Naval Academy. And in the case of Fort Meade, getting on and off base is very, very difficult. So you have to add those factors to the fact that the students in a lot of cases are miles away from the school they attend. So all of these factors really combine to make for very long bus rides. In an attempt to keep the routes from being even longer yet, the Transportation Office uses collector stops for these programs. These stops in most cases are located at libraries or central locations within communities and are not within the walking distance for most students. It's the responsibility of the parents or guardians to transport students to these stops. One reason why libraries are used is because libraries will stay open and it gives kids an opportunity to go inside, get shelter, warmth. They have a place to study until mom and dad could possibly pick them up, if in fact that's an issue for the parents. Now, let's look at school bus safety habits, or safe school bus habits. And in general, we're talking about at the bus stop, okay? First of all, students should arrive at the bus stop at least 10 minutes before the bus is scheduled to arrive for two reasons. And one of these most people don't think about. But it keeps the driver from being distracted by pedestrian movement around the bus. The most common cause of student injury at bus stops. Yes, showing up early is a safety factor. If a bus driver is driving down the road and you see pedestrians moving around as the bus is approaching, it's much more difficult for the bus driver to take account of all pedestrians. And the second reason is that it allows the bus driver to load the bus in a timely manner, keeping the bus on schedule. Getting on and off the bus safely. When the school bus arrives, your child should wait until the bus comes to a complete stop. The door opens and the driver said it's okay before approaching the bus door. Your child should use the handrails to avoid falling. Use caution around the bus. Your child should never walk behind the bus, and we'll go into that on a subsequent slide because it's very dangerous. If the bus driver can't see pedestrians, obviously they're in real danger, and there are places around the bus where the driver has a difficult time seeing kids. You also, as I said before, if all of the kids are standing at the bus stop prior to the bus coming, the bus driver can monitor the kids, can say, I see all of the kids that are supposed to be there, and they can watch them coming up on the bus. If kids are around the bus, it's much more difficult for the driver to maintain a safe situation. If your child must cross the street in front of the bus, so they're on the opposite side of the street, and there are times when the bus comes down the road, extends its stop arm out in front of the bus, you need to tell the students to walk on a sidewalk or along the side of the street to a place at least 5 giant steps in front of the bus before crossing. You want to, and that middle diagram shows that you should cross far enough in front of the bus so the bus driver can see you. Very short students who walk right in front of the front bumper are invisible to the driver. and that causes a safety issue. Your child should also make eye contact with the bus driver before crossing to make sure the driver can see him or her. There is nothing that prevents these kinds of issues more effectively than keeping eye contact with the bus driver. If your child drops something near the school bus, like a ball or book, the safe thing is for your child to tell the bus driver right away. Do not try to pick up the item because the driver might not be able to see him or her. Now I talked about crossing behind the bus. Let's talk about the bus stop danger zones. If you notice from the diagram in the upper left-hand corner, there's a general danger zone all around the bus at bus stops. You really don't want to approach close to the bus unless it's walking directly towards the service door. And then there are two areas of the bus that are intensely dangerous. They're the most dangerous, and that is the back right-hand side of the bus and behind the bus, and then directly in front of the bus. And especially with younger kids, where the bus driver can't see them if they're down below the grill there. When the school bus stops to pick up or discharge students there in danger zones around the bus, it must be avoided by students and parents alike. Some people don't understand this, but parents also. Parents, please note, if you walk up to the window of the bus to say one last goodbye to your child, you're in the danger zone. And I've watched bus stops, the ones I know most clearly are in apartment complexes, where a bus comes in, all of the parents converge on the bus. They're right up next to the bus saying goodbye to their student. It's a very dangerous thing to do. Whether you're a student or a parent, you need to stay out of that danger zone. This will keep a safe environment around the bus. The one safe pathway to the bus is directly perpendicular to the service door. And again, in the larger diagram, you see that yellow arrow that says walking area. You walk out 10 feet away from the bus and then go either right or left. And then in the diagram in the upper left-hand corner, you can see from the service door there's an area where you walk directly away from the bus, and that will maintain a safe situation around the bus. Now the next slide is something we wouldn't have talked about 10 years ago. But bus stops, by their nature, put large school buses and many smaller cars in close proximity to a large number of young pedestrians. Needless to say, distracted pedestrians, much like distracted drivers, increase the potential for danger. Please, please, please teach your students not to be smartphone zombies, walking to or from or standing at the bus stop. That would be good advice for moms and dads also. I read just a couple of days ago that the state of Hawaii now is making it a ticketable offense to walk across an intersection doing what this child is doing. So we're beginning to see actual laws that say you shouldn't be a distracted pedestrian around motor vehicles. I'd like to thank you for your attention and offer you best wishes for a safe and successful school year next year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Douglas. At this point, we will take a 5-minute break to allow you to reflect upon the presentation and to formulate any questions that you may have. And we will answer those questions in order. A reminder to our audience, questions posed and answers will be given. If you feel that your question was not fully answered, our staff will be available at the conclusion of the program to provide a more in-depth response to your question. Thank you. Great. Now that we've had an opportunity to reflect upon the presentation, again, a reminder, we will Dr. McMahon will read the questions that are posed. Mr. Douglas will provide an answer. And again, it will be a one-way at this point, but at the end of the presentation, at the conclusion of our presentation today, if there are questions that remain unanswered, or if there are personal questions in relationship to either your school personally or your child personally, we'll be certainly glad to continue to stay after until all of these questions are answered. But for the next 27 minutes, we will go through the questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jackson. So, Mr. Douglas, this first one is a bit long, so let me get through it and give you a chance to think about it a bit.
Sure.
So this is about students who are walking quite a distance from their homes to their schools, just over the 1.5 miles, right? So a series of questions. So what is considered a suitable walkway? And what are the safety issues that are taken into consideration when determining that walkway? And along those same lines, what are the criteria that you look at to deem a path acceptable or not for walking? And then what about the areas, the residential areas, that have no sidewalks or private roads, poor lighting, perhaps speeding cars on narrow roads with no sidewalks, and other issues? Really, the question is all about what's deemed an acceptable path to walk, sure, that 1.5 miles.
There are a lot of roads, a lot of residential roads in Anne Arundel County without sidewalks. Now that in any community you'll have some of that, but it seems to be an issue with quite a few communities in Anne Arundel County. And again, I'm going to sort of go here and there before being direct and answering the question, but that's one of the reasons why the county transportation office is looking very seriously about adding sidewalks. Because obviously a sidewalk it's a safe place to walk. It's a no-brainer. You have a sidewalk, you say it's a safe place to walk. Quite a few kids, and this goes back for years and years and years. I've been in Anne Arundel County for 3 years, but I worked in an adjacent county for 20 years, 19, and was aware over that period of time what was going on in Anne Arundel County. Us transportation folks, we talk to each other quite a bit. And it really is determined in almost every county that there are roads, residential roads without sidewalks. If the traffic is not of an arterial kind of traffic where you have, just really, really heavy traffic going through, it's determined that residential roads are safe if kids are walking on the road, and there are no other issues, say it's an arterial road or whatever. So we have quite a few roads where kids are asked to walk on the sidewalk. Some of them have cars parked on both sides, and we've had a very, very good safety record with those. So it's not a situation where they're near misses all the time. But it's determined that those roads where the traffic is light enough are safe for kids to walk along the road. Pathways, there's something very specific in the regulation that says if there's a wooded area that's more than 3/10 of a mile long, that's not considered to be a safe area to walk. Now we do have some places where there's a wooded area of 1/10 or shorter or 2/10 where you can see the communities on either side. It's not like you're out of vision of a subdivision that we do ask kids to walk along, and it has been that way traditionally for many, many, many years. The walk areas in the county have been well established. Now we've just gone through a pretty extensive audit of all the walk areas just to make sure that they're correct. And we did find a couple that are just not reflective of either the half mile or the mile and a half, and that we've looked at. We have one that we're implementing a walk area next year where it's a new community, and there are sufficient walkways and pathways through to the school where in the last 2 years kids have gotten a bus, but now they don't. This is up at Tanyard Springs. Ask the question again, because
Right,
I'm not sure that I've covered all of the
I think
points.
you hit them all. I will add a piece to that. Who is responsible for the students when they walk that 1.5 miles both ways?
That would be the parents. We're responsible if they're getting on a school bus the minute they walk on the school bus. Let me use a lifeline here. Mr. Shiknovich, if a student's walking to school, the school's responsibility starts when they arrive on school property. Is that correct? Yeah.
So this question is a little different. This is about when a school bus is late. And I know routinely we don't like to have a school bus late, but occasionally that happens. When a school bus is possibly routinely late, what's the alternative for the parents, especially those parents that have work to get to?
Right. It pains us when we have late buses, and because of the driver shortages and various situations, we have more of those than we want, where a bus shows up late. As a parent myself, and I have two girls, one's in college and one's at postgraduate work, but I still very much remember when they were young, and those years are very vivid. And one of them walked to school, the other one actually caught the bus. And as much as it's our responsibility to take those kids to school, and it's our responsibility to see that we provide a bus, as a parent, we had to make decisions sometimes and say, we don't want you standing out there that long. We're going to come by and pick you up and drive you to school. Sometimes that was convenient. Other times it's not very convenient. And we do recognize the fact that when we have a late bus, not everyone calls, but it causes inconvenience. I mean, we all live in a very, very busy world where showing up to work on time is important. And when the school bus causes a delay, we're mindful of that. And but I would say that in all cases, we try to run a bus back through. But let's be frank. A bus that's over an hour late is a bus that didn't show up. I mean, we'll run a bus back through just in case someone is standing there. But in most cases, most people have already made another decision.
So parents should notify your office, though,
yes.
if there is a late bus.
Oh, absolutely. And about notifying our office, obviously we get various types of phone calls. We might get a phone call 10 minutes after a bus was supposed to be there, where we have a crack at solving the problem. We also may get calls 5 hours after it saying, you know, it was very inconvenient for us, and obviously a call that's 5 hours after the fact, we've lost our opportunity to try to rectify the situation. So it's good if you know that this is a situation, call.
So here's a different one. What about schools where there is highway construction adjacent to the school? And so walkers may actually have issues associated with that highway construction or
right.
residential construction near the school. Is there any situation there where walkers then can ride a bus?
Can I ask what school we're talking about? Is this just a general
Yes.
question? Well, generally, if there's an unsafe situation, we have in the past provided temporary transportation. But
would you and your team look at that as a case-by-case basis?
Yes, we would look at it. If it's something that we know is going on for 6 months or a year or whatever, we get notification of those prior to them happening. And there have been times when we have added buses on a short-term basis for situations like that. If it's pothole repair where they're there for 2 days, it's difficult. I mean, by the time the machinery of the administration has found a solution, the construction's gone. So
Right.
We really do them on a case-by-case basis.
So this one sort of follows up on that. In that case, or in any case, what is the best way for the public or any given family or group of families to advocate for an additional bus stop?
call our office.
And tell the
So,
story?
Yes, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So these few are all about the new software.
Okay.
And basically, can you give us a little information about the status of the new software? And are there any bus stops being consolidated this coming year because of the software? And if so, when might families be notified?
I presented a presentation in, I think it was April, that mentioned
Yes.
that we would be consolidating stops. Mm-hmm. Quite frankly, as we go into this implementation, we find that certain portions of the implementation are much more involved than people recognized. So the answer is we're not at a point where we're going to be consolidating a lot of stops right now. Let me tell you what we're really working on now, because we implemented the software for summer school, so we're actually using it right now, and we wanted to do it for summer school prior to the opening, because as hectic as summer school opening is, and it is, because you have very, very little time to prepare for it. The students are identified through May and into June, and then we have to have them on a bus by first week of July. So it's a very hectic time. But what we're finding is that, and we knew this was coming from the literature, because there are certain counties who have implemented where they've found that the times are so off, and we're finding that there are some routes that the computer is much too optimistic about how much work it can do in a certain period of time. But we do have other routes that are right on. Now, this is the program we're using, and I've used several, is one of the more complex programs. It's with its robust power and utility. There are also some aspects of it that are not very user-friendly. So staff really has to work at getting up to speed, and they are, and they're doing all of the general operations very well. But in any sophisticated program, there are tricks and workarounds that no, workaround is a bad it's a bad phrase for IT people. So let me use something else. Tricks and adjustments that you learn over time to be able to tweak and to make these the routes better. And the staff is doing that right now. Our goal right now in the next 6 to 8 weeks is to move at such a pace that we get more of those times correctly, as opposed to having a route where the times are off.
So although you're not going to be making significant adjustments,
right,
if you were to make any, when would parents be notified? During that same window that we usually put out the bus routes, or at a different time in August?
It's your first option. But, you know, people don't realize that between the first day of school and about mid-October, we're making hundreds of changes. And the process, the way it should work, and I'm not saying that there isn't a mistake made here or there in communication, but the way it should work is that you identify what you're going to do, you identify, or you contact the bus driver, the contractor, notify them of the change, and then you notify the parents so that they're not surprised by it. And that's the way it should work. Now, the advantage to using this software is that for years and years and years, the staff at Millersville did everything by hand. And I'm here to say that the staff at Millersville did that as well as anyone. They are consummate professionals at routing buses, at tiering buses, putting trips together so that they're very efficient. But they work when you don't have as many kids as we do. And over the years, Anne Arundel County has grown and grown and grown, and they have really outgrown the ability to do that by hand. So even though the staff is extremely competent at doing it by hand, the county really has outgrown that process, and we really need to move to a more automated system. As we become very fluent in using the automated system, those communications are going to improve, because we also understand that we're not satisfied with the way we communicate with the public. We understand that there are times when it's not as efficient or is not as effective as it should be, and we're very, very mindful of that. And in getting the technology up to speed, we'll be able to improve on how we communicate. Because really, you talk about routing programs. One of their biggest advantages is that we can deal with data more effectively.
Right.
What we're doing with the county transportation office, and I know I'm getting a little off subject, but what we're doing with the county transportation office with identifying potential sidewalks is really incredible, and we're being able to give them quite a bit of information countywide that's going to be meaningful to where they can target areas that said if we put a 200-yard sidewalk right here, we can affect 400 kids, as opposed to putting a 200-yard sidewalk someplace else where you're affecting 2 students.
All right, so maybe more data, better decision making.
Absolutely. Now, the caveat here is it's a pretty heavy learning curve once it's up and running for us to then tweak it and to find the tricks to get all of this data.
So one of the questions is about current use. It sounds like you're feeling like so far so good, but the learning curve is steep.
Yes.
Is that true? And then another one associated with that is, do you anticipate cost savings and efficiency to improve over time?
Yes, in places where it's not. There have been conversations over the last 3 years that if we just combine the buses in a different way, we tier the trips, that there is a large cache of efficiency that we can find. I have good news and bad news. The good news is we're finding, and this can be corroborated with other counties. Montgomery County has found the same thing. Howard County found the same thing when I was there, and that is, of all of the functions that you ask this program to do, the one that's done best by human beings is tiering the trips. And one reason why is because, can you hear me when I'm away from the microphone? Can you hear me? No? Stay here. Yeah, I need to be, sorry. When a human being tiers buses, first of all, they don't start from scratch. They don't throw everything up in the air and then start building again. What they do is they go from what worked the year before. And when it worked the year before, part of it was halfway through the year they said, ooh, we have a tight situation here. How can we? It's a constant adjusting of routes. And you may have a student who has never had a bus change mid-year and go, whoa, I didn't know that happened. There are other folks that, in January we notify them that 2 weeks from now you have a different bus because community came in, we need to put 20 more kids on that bus, which means that we have to juggle some other students around. And the staff is very, very good at tweaking those. And then they start the next year by going, okay, where are the holes? What can I put in the hole? Okay, if there's a high school and a middle school and then a small gap and then an elementary school, it's what can I put in there? Can we make a shorter trip to put in there? And they tighten it up. When you do this with the computer generates these times, and if any 2 of those trips overlap by as much as a minute, they'll say you need another bus, which it actually does. I mean, and we've been going through this over the past 6 months and doing some of these scenarios where we say, okay, computer, tell us how these should be tiered. And the minute 2 of those trips overlap by as much as a minute, they'll say, oh, you can't do this with 14 buses, you need 15. And if you check with other transportation offices, they'll all give you the same information. Now, Baltimore City won't. I was at Baltimore City last week, and part there is they're looking at tiering more tightly. They only have 3 trips on a bus instead of 4 or 5, the way we do. So when you do have large gaps, yes, the machine can fill in those gaps. One other thing that you need to understand is if you stand out in the morning and you see a bus that's at a shopping center sitting there for 10, 15 minutes, excuse me, you have to understand that we tier on the afternoon because that's where you need the most time. If you have a 50-minute high school run and then a 40-minute middle school run and two 20-minute elementary school runs, what happens in the morning is that high school where you need 50 minutes, you start earlier in the morning, you drop them off, and then you have a gap before you take in your middle school. In the afternoon, once it starts rolling from that high school, it takes 50 minutes in the afternoon. If you tightened it up by tiering on the morning, you're not going to have time in the afternoon. It'll always get to subsequent schools late. So that's why we tier on the afternoon instead of the morning. And then there's been quite a bit of study, and we do it ourselves. I mean, we're not blind to the fact that there are issues with school start times. And if you move those times around, it has ramifications where you take your longest route, which is the high school, put it in the middle of the tier or at the end. Well, let's take the middle. In the middle, then you have to account for 50 minutes before the school time and 50 minutes after, which means that you can't pack them in as tight. So
Makes sense. Yeah. Right. So you're saying software-wise, we're working on it? We're working diligently?
Yeah, but let me go back to one point about the good news and bad news.
Okay.
The good news is those who were expecting a large cache of efficiency to be found by the tiering, the bad news is it's not there. The good news is the staff has been using their skills to route those buses as efficiently as possible for years and years and years. So that's the good news. The bad news is there's not a cache of efficiency out there to be had. Now, to continue with that answer, I'm sorry to go on too long, but the efficiencies we are going to find will be routing within the trips, not combining the trips, but routing within the trips. We will be able to find efficiencies. The other thing is that you can route a bus to 3 schools and pack the bus tight. So you have, let's say we have 50 students on 3 different trips, and the bus is fairly full. So that bus is serving 150 kids a day, okay? If you take 4 trips at 40 kids, you're serving 160. So sometimes not loading the buses tight, if you look at the big picture of how many kids is this bus serving each day, you can increase that number by increasing the number of trips and decreasing the number of students on the bus. So these are complex issues.
Yes.
So anyway.
I think our time is running short. I'm going to end with this one, Mr. Douglas. This is about students with special needs. The question is how, well, it's more like why. Why can parents who have a student with special needs not request transportation for their student?
Okay. Well, they can.
Oh, they can.
They just need to do it through the IEP process. We're downstream from the IEP process. It's the IEP team that's going to determine what's appropriate, what's an appropriate service based on the needs of the student. When that IEP is then developed and finalized, then we get our marching orders from special ed. People don't come right to transportation for those exceptions. It has to go through that IEP process, and then we get our marching orders. If special ed says this student needs special needs transportation, we don't have the ability, nor should we, to say, oh, we don't think so.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. It was a great answers. Anyone who submitted a question, and I think Mrs. Jackson, are you going to go over this?
Yes, ma'am.
Because we touched on the topics in total, but some of them didn't get as much depth as others.
So first and foremost, thank you to Mr. Douglas and to Dr. McMahon for your participation this evening. For the sake of programming, we're going to, at this time, conclude the formal portion of our program. But we realize that you have other questions and you need clarification on some of the questions that you have already answered. And so therefore, Mr. Douglas and some of our other staff will be available to answer your questions or to provide clarification. A reminder to the public that the video of this evening will be posted online. And again, my sincerest thanks on behalf of Dr. Arlotto and the entire Anne Arundel County Public Schools. And we invite you to join us next Tuesday here in the boardroom at 6 o'clock, July 17th, when our Office of Safe and Orderly Schools will present an overview of the Student Code of Conduct. Thank you. And again, have a great and safe evening, and Mr. Douglas will be available. Thank you.